Yeah,
Go ahead. Go ahead.
With
Respond.
great interest. Yeah.
Yeah.
Happy to join in this discussion. I'd like to respond to a few of the things, but first I think I should clear up that the title is perhaps a little bit misleading. I think this is not a question about the LGB dropping the T, but why the T was added to LGB in the first place. And people perhaps think that it's always been there, but in fact, in the UK, it was only added in 2015. And no lesbians were consulted at the time. The consultation was all with trans groups. And I think you would have found that lesbians would have been very unhappy. In fact, many lesbians were unhappy when they discovered that the T was added. LGB is about relationships. It's about love, it's about sex, it's about who you're attracted to. Are you attracted to men? Are you attracted to women? Or are you attracted to both? It's very clear sexual orientation. T and Q and all the other letters that have been added since then are about identity issues. They're completely separate, and it's caused a lot of confusion. We've seen how much confusion it's caused with Labour politicians trying desperately to avoid saying what a woman is, and that's quite comic. But it's also caused a lot of tragedy, particularly for lesbians. It's no coincidence that LGBT Alliance was founded by Kate Harris and me, two lesbians, and our CEO is a lesbian, and also the chair of the board is a lesbian. It's lesbians who have suffered from the addition of the T to LGB. And I think your subtitle perhaps should be reading "Campaigners argue that the gay community has been hijacked." But anyway, so what has happened with lesbians? Let me explain why I'm saying that it's a tragedy for lesbians. What we're seeing at the moment, and you can look, that thousands, hundreds of thousands of lesbians are having their breasts removed. You can see tens of thousands fundraising on GoFundMe to have their breasts removed. And this is because it is no longer cool to be lesbian. In fact, I spoke to a 19-year-old recently who said that throughout her secondary school, she'd been told she must be a boy. She must be a boy because she fell for girls. This is the kind of homophobia that is being taught at schools, taught online and spread by peers, so that lesbians don't feel comfortable about being lesbian anymore. This kind of homophobia is a real tragedy. And in fact, the fact that it is being propagated, I think it calls for a public inquiry. How is it possible? 10 years ago, you would have been thought a bit weird if you'd said that men can change into women and women can change into men. And these days, you're called weird if you deny it. The fact is, you can't change sex. Children shouldn't be taught that they can change sex. It's like teaching them, they can fly.
Bev.
They might jump out of the window and find they can't fly and they can't change sex.
That argument has been used so many times.
You've brought up a lot of points there, I'm going to say, and that is the kind of the issue with this conversation as a whole, because we're talking about so many different types of people. I mean, in and of itself, I find it fascinating that,
I'm talking about lesbians.
You're talking about...
I think the other people are talking about women.
The examples that Bev and Ollie give are totally unrepresentative. Yes, they happen, and I condemn them, but they're not representative. Britain's biggest lesbian celebration, Lesbian Visibility Week, which took place in April, was inclusive of trans and non-binary women. It was celebrated by lesbians. Lesbians themselves wanted trans and non-binary people to be part of this celebration.
I'm not going to let you get away with this.
Bev, I listened to you without interruption. Can you please show courtesy, be polite and courteous? Those lesbian women who are behind Lesbian Visibility Week, they included trans and non-binary people with the support of the wider lesbian community. There are a small number of lesbians who disagree with this trend. I accept that. They're entitled to their point of view, but they're not representative of the wider lesbian community. I
want to come to James now. You wanted to jump in. Bev, we will come back to you. We will come back to you, Bev, but we're just going to the studio. James, you wanted to jump in or something. Now, and I just broadly have a question. Do you find this conversation is going to... Obviously, we're not going to find a solution or resolution, but is it useful to talk about?
No, it's not. I actually find it incredibly boring, and I think the stuff that Bev is spouting is transphobia, and I genuinely believe that it's kind of amusing that you're talking about homophobia, because really you're just being transphobic, and those two things don't cancel each other out. They are not helpful at all. And you're talking about children being indoctrinated It's insanity. It's literally not happening. There's no proof of that happening. Ollie, you've just converted to the Catholic. You just converted to the Catholic Church. You're not concerning yourself with actual evidence.
What about children having
there.
double mastectomies?
Why are you bringing up conversations like that when you have not had that yourself?
I mean, can Ollie not speak to his personal experience?
Well, his personal experience is literally wanting to look like an Asian pop star.
This is a great example.
But we're not talking about banning BTS, are we?
I'm allowed to speak. This is a great example of woke people. You shout people down.
Thank you for
you
calling
don't
me a
give
woke
people.
person.
You know, talking of inclusivity.
Yes.
What about including women in this conversation? What about including women in
Women
wrestling?
are included in this conversation.
They're not, because trans
You've got one
activists
right here suggesting that she supports LGBTQ plus
Let me speak. Trans activists are constantly pushing at women. Just yesterday at the Oxford Union, a trans activist glued themselves to the floor because they didn't want a woman to speak about women's rights. Is that fair? Do you think it's fair that women aren't allowed to have a conversation, that their movement is just suddenly hijacked? They can't do sports. They're scared to speak up. Athletes are scared to speak up in case they're deemed transphobic for saying the simple fact that biological men have a competitive advantage. We know that. So let's let women speak. Let's stop going on about what trans activists...
Talking of letting women speak, let's get out to Bev. Go on then, Bev.
Yeah, I want to say that first of all, we tried very hard to contact Stonewall when they changed, and when Stonewall changed, all the other organisations that had been gay rights groups around the country all changed to focus on gender identity, and we tried to get them to discuss the problems, but they wouldn't. We eventually had to form LGB Alliance, which goes back to the roots of standing up for sexual orientation. The second we formed LGB Alliance, Peter, and you can listen, please listen to this, we were deluged by messages from lesbians all over the world. Thank God you're here. I have felt so isolated. Thank God. When are you setting up in Canada? When are you setting up in Australia? Thank God. What can I do to help? And the reason that we were able to grow so quickly, we were just two women, two old dykes. Yes, we had no money. We had no external funding. And all this nonsense about right-wing funding it's complete nonsense. We were two women who worked our asses off 7 days a week, 16 hours a day. And for all these lesbians who contacted us, and they joined us, and we built a wonderful organisation of some of the cleverest,
let's give Peter a chance to respond,
people in the world.
Bev, you and I were both in the Gay Liberation Front in the early 1970s. And as you well know, prominent among the Gay Liberation Front activists were trans women like Carla and Rachel. They were prominent in our movement. They were featured in the Come Together newspaper. It was part of our wider movement. And just as we challenged premises that refused to serve lesbian, gay and bisexual people, we also had a very famous sit-in at a cafe in Piccadilly Circus which refused to serve trans people. We saw these two different struggles as being different, but also having communality, the common experience of prejudice, discrimination and hate crime. And we should stay together now. We should stand up for each other and not divide.
Yeah, we're not staying together, Peter.
Bev, I'm very sorry.
I need to ask Peter if he's read Stuart Feather's book, Blowing the Lid,
Bev,
which gives the history.
You can ask Peter that on the DMs after the show. Unfortunately, we are fresh.
Everybody should read it.
We are fresh out of time. Look, we really appreciate you joining the conversation this evening, and to our panellists in the studio as well. I've been fascinated by this, especially on the eve of Pride Month, talking about division, but hopefully a bit more unity. It's been great to have all your insights. Thanks so much for your time.